Hey guys, it's Mute, and welcome back to my channel. Or if you're new, welcome. I hope you enjoy all that I have to offer. If you don't know who I am, I go by Mute or Mute-sensei. But for today, you guys can call me Mute-sensei, because in this video, I'm going to teach you some pretty cool things about digital art. Now, I'm primarily a digital artist, so for people more acquainted with traditional art, or simply art that's not on a screen, 100% of what I say may not apply to you, but in the end, there may be something that you can still take away from all this. I find that what I'm going to be talking about is pretty helpful when it comes to working on my art, and may even be helpful to you all as well. So without further ado, let's hajime mashou! So, whenever I begin a piece, one thing that I found that's really beneficial is to draw on a gray or a light gray background. This may not seem like a big deal if you're doing some sketching, but regardless of what you may be working on, it really does wonders for a piece. You especially want to avoid drawing on a completely white background. The reason why I say this is because of a couple of reasons. So, like I said before, if you're simply sketching, then it's not as bad. But if you were to paint with a white background, any colors you put down will be much lighter in value than intended. For those of you who aren't familiar, the concept of value is essentially like this. If you were to create a piece in black and white, the lighter sections would have a lighter value, meanwhile the darker sections would have darker values. Sorry to anyone if I caused you to have flashbacks to your middle school art class. That was not my intention. As an example of why you shouldn't use a white background to add paint or color, let's say if you wanted to shade or add shadows to an image. It may look like a good quote-unquote shadow value in the moment, but as soon as you move that same image to a neutral or a darker background, that object will appear to be much brighter in its new environment, and it simply ends up looking unnatural. I can show a visual example so it's easier to understand what I mean. The second reason why I wouldn't recommend drawing on a white background is more of a general health reason, really. I hear a lot in the art community that drawing on a bright background does quite the opposite of wonders on the eyes, especially when they're exposed to it for a long time. In the end, it puts a strain on the eyes, and you're more likely to develop eye fatigue from it. So there you go. My next word of advice when it comes to digital art, or even art in general, is to not have just one idea for a piece, but to experiment with multiple ideas. A lot of the time, for myself, whenever I start working on a piece, I usually have a pretty good image in my head of what I want it to look like, and like a lot of the time, once I actually put it on the page, it doesn't come out quite as well as I imagined it. So typically, it's a good idea to sketch out or plan out multiple ideas for the same piece, whether it be different poses, different camera angles, whatever you want, just so you're more prepared in the case that you start falling out of love with an idea once you start fleshing it out. Also, it's generally good to have multiple ideas because usually the first idea may not be the greatest, or there's an even better idea that you come across later on. So something that I try to practice as often as I can is to draw while zoomed out from my canvas. The reason why I find this to be very important whenever I draw digitally is because it allows me, quite literally, to see the bigger picture. It's a lot easier to see how different parts of the piece relate to and work with each other. I find this to be especially helpful for working on portraits. Zooming out allows you to get a good sense of the proportions of a face, or a body, etc. And it becomes a lot easier to notice and correct any mistakes that you made. Typically I won't work zoomed in unless I think I made enough progress in a piece to where I'm allowed to, and I need a better view of a certain area, or I'm confident that what I'm doing will not muck up the piece. Usually I find that if I work zoomed in when it's too early, then I tend to focus too much on just that singular part, instead of trying to address that part and make it work with the whole piece, if that makes sense. Generally, it's a good habit to work zoomed out until you start working on the minor details, or something that you would need to work up close for. One of the main reasons why I love digital art so much is because, as a digital artist, I'm able to easily fix as many mistakes as I make. In fact, it's so easy that sometimes as digital artists, we take the fact that we can fix our mistakes so quickly for granted, oftentimes putting what we need to fix in the back of our minds so we can focus on the cooler stuff. Or maybe you don't even realize that there's something that needs fixing through all the rush and excitement of working on your piece. I know I can imagine that it gets to a point where, hypothetically, because this has definitely never happened to me in real life or anything, but say for example, one minute you're nearly finished with your line art, and then the next minute you notice that some of the proportions are all wrong, and then the next hour or so you end up having a mid-artwork crisis. But anyway, what I'm trying to get at is, in order to make sure your art-making process goes as smoothly as possible, it's best to make as many mistakes as you can in either the sketch phase or the rough phase if you're one of those Philip DeFranco type of artists that just like to jump right into your work. Trust me, it will save you a lot of grief in the long run. These next couple of tips will be about methods to improve your overall line art quality. When I look at other artworks online, depending on the artist, I think the line art can really emphasize or enhance the style. So I think it's important to practice good lining techniques, since it can pretty much make or break an image. My first piece of advice is to use different brush or pen sizes for your line art. This is really important if you want your piece to look more dynamic. It really helps you differentiate between the main parts of your piece, and it gives the impression that, for instance, that some parts may be thicker, or larger, or more delicate than others. Compared to if I just used the same brush and same exact size for my line art, my art would look very dull, and in some places that type of brush or size may not even be appropriate. So not only does differentiating your sizes bring more life into your piece, but I think using a completely different tool entirely really helps too. Personally, I like to switch between using two main tools when it comes to my line art. If you're curious about what program I use, I like to use Clip Studio Paint. Now, depending on what I'm working on, I'll either use the marker pen under the marker section. Typically I'll use this for my more quote-unquote cartoony art, or essentially whenever I want to add some extra C's to the thickness of my line art. Or I'll use the Real G pen under the pen section. Usually I like to use this tool for more organic or flowy line art, mainly because I like how close it feels to using an actual brush pen. So TLDR, it's good practice to varying your uses of line art, because it helps it look so much cooler. So now that I've discussed the tools behind better line art, let's address the process of creating good line art. When I look at the art that I made when I started getting into digital arts several years ago, the one thing that stands out to me the most is the super wobbly line art. I actually remember how I would line my art at the time too. I'd use very sketchy lines with short and quick brush strokes. And looking back on it now, I think that was definitely one of the things that separated my art from then from my art now. So that's why I say that the key to having nice or nicer looking line art is quick but large brush strokes. And when you start on your line art, when you put your pen to the paper, or in this case your pen to your tablet, you definitely don't want to take your time with drawing your lines. Because naturally, our hands shake, and the longer you drag out a line or a brush stroke, unless you have an extremely steady hand, that line is going to turn out very shaky. So, if you're especially someone who hasn't had much experience with line art, or you don't have very good control of your lines, it's best to make sure your brush strokes are quick and as smooth as possible. For the rest of this video, I'm going to focus on general habits that are good to practice during as well as outside of your art process. These will not only help the overall quality of your work, but I think these will also be helpful to your art journey and your career as an artist. So, if I were big enough to have a sponsor, this would actually make a pretty good segue for this. But my first general piece of advice is to make sure that you're taking breaks. I'm mainly talking to myself when I say this, because I don't know about you guys, but I'm really bad at taking breaks, to the point where I actually find myself feeling bad whenever I make time for myself. I think because I always feel like I'm not being productive enough, or that there's always something else that I could be working on, but that's probably just me being hard on myself. If there is anyone who feels similar to this, feel free to let me know, but I can imagine that there's a lot of other artists who also struggle with things like practicing self-care. So if you zoned out for the past 15 seconds or so, TLDR, don't be like me. The main reason for bringing this up is because doing so can actually take a toll on your health, physically and mentally speaking. As a rule of thumb, it's best to take a break from your work every hour or so, whether it be to do some needed stretching or to keep yourself hydrated. I'd also recommend making an effort to step outside for at least a little bit every day, especially in these times. I find that doing things like going for a walk, or even sitting outside for a few minutes really helps my mental health. I think it's very important that as artists we take the time to properly take care of ourselves and practice stepping away from our work before it's too late. After all, if you're not feeling like your best, then it really takes a toll on your work as well. There's a recommendation that I'd also like to include to make it easier to take a break from what's a potentially stressful piece. Something that I think is useful is to have yourself work on multiple pieces at the same time. Now, when I say this, I don't mean to the point that you have about 1 million whips in your folder that you start not caring about and ultimately never finish. I'm talking to you, past self. But I'm mainly referring to just having a couple pieces that you can go back and forth between as you make progress. I often find that when I'm focusing all my attention on just one piece at a time, especially if it's an art assignment for school, eventually I start to become bored and then I lose motivation to finish the piece. So if you do end up working on multiple works at the same time, you can always switch to something else that seems more refreshing the minute you start feeling bored. So moving on to my next tip. This is something that you hear a lot about in the art community, and maybe even something you see me do a lot in my speed paints, and to that I apologize. That very thing is to flip your canvas. Most of you may already know why this is important because it's said so often, but for those who don't know, the reason why so many artists say that it's important to get into the practice of flipping the canvas is because it allows you to see the flaws in your piece that you wouldn't see otherwise. For instance, if I were to work on a piece and never flip my canvas, it may look correct to me, but to someone else viewing my work, they could possibly see that something is off. Changing the orientation of your canvas allows you to see and correct mistakes from the perspective of what someone else may see. One thing I would caution against though is having your canvas stay flipped for too long. If you leave it flipped for too long, then you'll only make the same mistakes you would have if you never flipped the canvas. Therefore, to combat this, when you do flip your canvas, I think it's best to just focus on fixing what needs to be fixed before flipping it back. Along with making sure to flip your canvas every now and then, it's good to get into the practice of using your handy dandy Navigator to view your work. If you're not sure what I mean by the term Navigator, most art programs actually have it, but typically it's a smaller window that's found in the top corner that lets you view the piece you're working on from a zoomed out perspective. I find this really helpful for whenever I'm drawing a certain pose, and I want to make sure that the silhouette looks interesting enough. This has also been really helpful for me whenever I want to get a good first impression of my piece, such as if I have good placement for my subjects in the piece, or if I used a good color palette and things like that. It's kind of similar to what I said earlier about flipping your canvas, since it also gives you a good impression of how someone else sees your work, just on a teenier scale, I suppose. So yeah, I think it's definitely good to use these two tips in tandem throughout your process. Something that I think can also be beneficial to a lot of artists, regardless of what medium you use, is to take inspiration from other artists. What usually motivates me to get up and draw is looking at artists I follow online. And not only do I get hella jealous, but there may end up being some aspects of their work that I actually really like. So much so that I make a mental note of what I like about their work, and every now and again I apply it to my own. And when I say apply, I don't mean copy their work and pass it off as your own. Unless it's for a study where you genuinely want to learn about their art process and you credit them, keyword credit, then it's definitely not okay to do. What I mean to say is, there may be an artist that you're really into, and you like something about their work. Maybe it's how they draw characters, maybe it's their line art, maybe it's how they use color in their work. whatever it may be, you may want to take that element and use it in your own work. I think maybe the point where it's gone too far is if you fixate on trying to draw exactly like them. I think I can say that's maybe when you missed the point. For me, I can easily say that one of my favorite artists to take inspiration from is Ilya Kuvshinov. And I'm so sorry if I butchered your name, senpai. But no, I really love his work as an artist. When I first came across his work, being a huge weeb and all, I really loved the way he stylized his portraits, especially the girls he drew in his anime-type style. For the most part, his works were simple, but they were also super interesting to me. I feel like he was especially inspirational to me because growing up as an artist, I often heard that drawing anime wouldn't get me a job, or that it's very difficult finding a job as an anime artist, which can be true, but after seeing Ilya's work, I was convinced that maybe it is possible after all. Pretty much the moment I looked at his works, I was convinced that I wanted to make a living as a freelance artist. But yeah, to this day, I still definitely take inspiration from anime, and even though my work looks nothing like Ilya's, at the end of the day, his work definitely taught me to not be ashamed of drawing what makes me happy. So, after what might feel like forever, we have finally reached the final lesson with Mute-sensei. This one is the most important, so listen carefully, my students. The key to being the best artist you can be, the key to fulfilling all your hopes and dreams, the key to getting 1 million bajillion followers on Instagram is to have fun. I didn't say it wasn't going to be corny, but it's true. Now, I know I'm not the best artist out there, for sure, but really the only reason why I was able to make it this far in my career was because I focused on stuff that I like doing. I drew and took inspiration from people and things that made me happy, and I still do. In fact, I had the same exact feeling when I started out as an artist, and I've come to the point that I've decided I never want to lose that feeling. And I think it's reasonable to say that most artists today wouldn't even be in this field if they didn't love it either. So, if none of these tips stick with you from this video, just at least remember to have fun with whatever you make. Alright, so before I go, I want to thank you for putting up with me and sticking with me up to this point. I'd also would like to give an immense thank you for all of the support on my last video. I legitimately didn't expect it to blow up that much, I'm being honest. But yeah, I'm hella proud of that video. Like, there's nothing I would change about it, and I still stand by what I said in that video. Whether it would have gotten me like 200 views or whatever, like, that wouldn't have mattered to me. At the end of the day, I like putting out content that I'm proud of. So really, I mean, I guess views wouldn't have mattered, but like, never in a million years would I expect to get as many views as I did on that video. So thank you so much for all the support and all the comments. Whether or not you agreed with me on the video, I still took in, and I at least learned something from each and every comment, so thank you so much. And with that, I also want to thank you guys for allowing me to reach 1,000 subscribers. Like, that's wild. Like, I don't know, I didn't think I'd get to this point, like, so quickly. I don't know, even now I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around it, but again, thank you so much. I'm immensely grateful. Like, I'm pretty lucky to be in the situation that I am right now, so, and that pretty much wouldn't have happened without you guys, so thank you so much, and thanks for all the support in general. Like, I am immensely grateful. But yeah, that's enough of me rambling. I really hope you guys enjoyed this video. I wanted to make something that wasn't actually talking about a person for once, because I feel like I don't want to end up going down like a rabbit hole of just talking about people. So yeah, I just wanted to talk about something that I enjoyed, or I enjoy talking about, and I hope you guys enjoyed this video too. So if you did enjoy it, like, comment, and subscribe if you so choose to, and as always, I hope your day is as lovely as you are. Bye-bye!